What is the one pain that subcontractors, contractors, and owners all share? It is dealing with change orders. Welcome to Construction Genius, and my guest today is Cameron Page, the CEO and founder of Extracker. Extracker is a software product designed to help construction teams track change orders. One of the great things about Cameron is that he actually has construction industry experience, working for a large general contractor out of the Bay Area before launching Extracker. So he has dealt with this problem on the battlefield, so to speak, of a construction project. He understands it inside and out. He has great insights into how to deal with the challenges associated with change order management and change order communication. And that's what we're going to talk about here today on Construction Genius. So enjoy my interview with Cameron. Feel free to share it with other people in the industry. And thank you for listening to the program. This is Eric Anderton, and you're listening to Construction Genius, a leadership masterclass. Thomas Edison said that genius is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. If you're a construction leader, you know all about the perspiration, and this show is all about the 1% inspiration that you can add to your hard work to help you to improve your leadership. Cameron, welcome to Construction Genius. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Eric.
You know, I was checking out your LinkedIn profile and something struck my eyes immediately, that you were a carpenter for LB Construction out of Sacramento.
Yes, I was. I spent a couple of summers there.
That's beautiful. The reason it struck my eye is because when I first started working with construction companies back in 2004, my first ever client was LB Construction, Jordy and Vance. They're the L and the B, and they're still my client today. So it's terrific to see that you got your start with them. Why did you start working with LB as a carpenter during the summers way back in the day?
Yeah, it was around the time that I got accepted to Cal Poly's construction management program. I always knew I wanted to build things, but my family doesn't come from a construction background. And so I wanted to get some experience. I saw the title construction management. I was like, so I'm going to be managing construction projects someday. And for some reason, it clicked at a young age. I was like, well, I'm probably going to need to have some hands-on experience so I can actually know what I'm doing. And so, yeah, through a local apprenticeship program, they listed out a couple options for companies. And because they were doing wood framing, I thought it'd be cool to actually build some structures and things and see things go up. I went to LB and met with Jordy and Vance, and they didn't know what to do with me. So they put me with Norm Boren, who's one of their master carpenters. And I followed him around for a couple summers, and it was great. They would send him out to job sites with kind of technical challenges on them. And I got to learn from one of their best. So it was a blast. I rely on that experience every day. I mean, that was the best experience I could have gotten to start.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. I think it's interesting because you set that educational priority of construction management, but you understood the importance of being in the field. After you got your degree at Cal Poly, where did you go from there?
Yeah, I was lucky enough to graduate in 2009. Which, as we all remember, was not the best time to graduate with a construction degree. It's funny. I started at Cal Poly in 2005 when things were booming, and that's when I worked for LB and a couple other companies after that. But right as a year before I graduated, the market turned, but luckily, I think because I had some of that background, I connected with DevCon Construction, I was lucky enough to get a position there as a field engineer. And that's where I started my career on the general contracting side.
That's great. So you worked as a with the general contractors with DevCon for a number of years. And then in May 2018, you launched Extracker, which is a software company. And the main thing you focus on is what? Tell us about that real quick.
Yeah, we focus simply on, it's not super simple, but we focus on change order communication. So we really believe that it's a new category in our industry. There's a lot of change order management software, and we're not looking to compete with that because change order management software by nature is where you keep your budget, and it's usually internal facing, either accounting or project management software. So we're the communication layer between subs and GCs and owners, so that they can really ensure what they're forecasting internally is on the same page as their trade partners, and that there aren't going to be surprises when it comes to how to contract work.
Okay, so we got change order, we got communication, and then I heard the word surprises.
Yeah.
So let's dive into this. I want to take some time to talk about why change orders are so painful in the construction industry. But first, I'd like to ask, why is it that change orders are seemingly unique to the construction industry?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why this process has evolved in our industry to what it is today. But simply put, especially the last, 10 decades, most projects were designed, contracts were written based on the scope of those projects. And if something changed, there needed to be a mechanism to track those costs and the associated scope. And that's really what a change order request is the contractor, whether it's a sub or a GC, going to their client and saying, hey, the architect changed something, the architect missed something, there's an unforeseen condition, you want me to work overtime, there's trade damage, whatever the change might be, which it's almost limitless. There needs to be a mechanism in place to track those costs and make sure that what the contractor is charging for, is valid and it's truly out of contract work. And so that's the change order request process, as it is today in a nutshell. A change order request is issued, and in response, a change order is sent back that both parties sign, and that updates the contract value so that they can bill for the revised amount. And that's sort of the process that it exists today.
Yep. And so we're all familiar with that. And yet we all know the pain associated with that. Why do you think the change order process is so painful?
I think there's a variety of reasons. I think, again, most of the tools in place today when it comes to a software system are, again, internal facing. And it's a big industry, right? So all the subcontractors have their own software and systems in place. All the GCs have their own financial systems in place. So there really is a lack of standardization in the industry. And a lot of most subcontractors that we talk to and that I worked with, my 9 years at DevCon, were really kind of creating their own process for change order requests. They'd have an Excel workbook, maybe where they would create the cover sheet. If it was field directed extra work, every sub would have their own carbon copy, time and material tag, or extra work authorization book. And so we as a GC were receiving 30 or 40 different formats for change order requests in the industry. And most of our subs were relying on tools that existed outside of their financial software to process and send us these documents. So there was inherently a delay in the processing time, which really hurts both parties. For the subcontractor, it's their revenue, right? So especially if it's T&M work that's done out on a job site, they're trying to get reimbursed for that as fast as possible. And their own processing time is what's hurting them on that. And then if there's bad documentation, it delays the approval time because we as the GC are trying to understand it. And if it's handwritten or if the labor rates don't make sense or if the scope doesn't make sense, we have to go back and forth with them before we can present it to our owner.
Yep.
Then there's the owner review, and then we can finally issue a change order so they can bill for it. And so because all those things are happening through email, Excel spreadsheets, carbon copy, it really makes the process incredibly painful for everyone. And the biggest thing is that it introduces the potential for surprises. And that's really where projects run over budget in our industry. It's not necessarily that something caused the cost overrun. It's that it wasn't identified in real time. Because if you can identify it in real time, you can proactively mitigate it and figure out a path to hopefully avoid it. But if it's weeks and months later and the work has already moved on, that's when projects wind up in financial situations.
So there needs to be a proactivity on the part of the subs to be able to identify the changes and communicate them to the GCs. But there's this standardization of communication that needs to happen in order to remove some of that friction. Am I hearing that right?
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Other than that standardization process, why do you think that friction occurs? Do you think it's a matter of trust between the GCs and the subs? Is it owner ignorance where perhaps they're getting into something and they're not really understanding the fact that changes are going to occur? In your experience, give me a little bit more about that friction and what the best contractors are doing to overcome that.
Yeah, I think it's a combination of communication and being proactive. When a project starts, everyone's singing Kumbaya and we're ready to start this project, and there won't be a single change order on this job.
Yeah, right.
And that's just not the nature of the industry, especially with design build and things changing in our space, where the design is more fluid. That means there's going to be more changes. And so what typically doesn't happen at the beginning of a project is the conversation around how are we going to standardize this process? What are the expectations for subcontractors? Am I getting the labor rates, the material rates approved up front, which will make change order review more easy? And a lot of times there's so many things to focus on at the beginning of a project when maybe there aren't a lot of change order requests. A lot of that initial setup gets overlooked. And then 6 months later, when you have a couple hundred subcontractor change order requests to look at, you wish you would have been more proactive up front. But frankly, without a software tool in place to do that, you're really relying on, maybe sending your subcontractors a shared Excel log that you want them to, keep tabs on what they've sent. Or maybe you're sending them a template that you want them to fill out for a change order request. And when it comes to field-directed extra work, you're really at the mercy of every subcontractor's carbon copy workbook for creating extra work authorizations and T&M tags. So I say that, being proactive is the way to do it, but frankly, it's hard to do.
Let me just ask this. So like you said, we've signed the documents, everybody's happy, everybody's kumbaya. Who's responsible for having that change order conversation, the foundational one, and when should that conversation take place?
It's the general contractor is responsible. And frankly, it should be in the bid docs. It should be in the bid documents. It says, with your bid, I want to see your labor rates. If you are going to require your subs to fill out some sort of template for change order requests, which doesn't always happen, you should include that in the bid documents so you're not surprising your subcontractors after the fact. If it comes to T&M tags and there's a formal process of who should sign them, who should authorize it, that process should also be laid out. Because again, once someone's bid a job and you've awarded them a contract, it is hard to go out back to a subcontractor and say, hey, here's how we're going to do change order requests. You can't use your system. The sub's going to say, well, I did the job not knowing I had to do all that. And a good subcontractor will adopt and work with their client. But again, it just adds friction. So the more upfront you can be, the better. And then frankly, having a subcontractor weekly meeting, bringing it up and having those expectations communicated is something that can be done after the fact. But frankly, it's up to the general contractor to facilitate that conversation with their subs. And honestly, it's in their subs. It's good for their subcontractors. Like if you want to be a good partner to your subcontractors, you should help them track costs and that you don't wind up in litigation or a dispute over a change order request because the process wasn't transparent and communicated up front.
So you've got this idea of the GC taking the initiative to clearly communicate to the subs having their act together so that they can get the GCs the information that they need. In your experience, what is the most effective way for the GCs to communicate with the owners about changes? What have you seen some tactics or strategies that GCs use to help smooth that tough conversation with the owners?
Yeah, well, a lot of it depends too on the project delivery. So if it's a guaranteed maximum price contract, and let's say it's the design build delivery method, in that GMP, you're going to help your client plan for change order requests. And that's what we would do at DevCon is we would write guaranteed maximum price contracts and we would guarantee the price of the contract based on the current scope. And we would carry allowances for anticipated change orders. If we looked at the schedule and it was a tight schedule, we'd include an allowance for overtime. If it was a TI that was going to be really fast paced, we knew that there was probably going to be trade damage and paint touch up that needed to be done. So we carried an allowance for that. And we would communicate to our owner why we were doing that. Now, the challenge is reconciling those allowances during the project is difficult when you're doing it with carbon copy tags. Let's say it's trade damage. Your subs are going to be tracking it on carbon copy. You're going to be waiting on them to process those change order requests so that you can send it to the client. But you want to paint the full picture for the client. And if it's taking, we found with our data that we've gone back and researched the historical projects, on average, it takes about 24 days for those to get processed. So inherently, you're working against a 24-day delay in recognizing those costs, which makes it incredibly hard to keep your client up to date. So again, it's just all about being proactive and being transparent with what you're sending your client. And for a GC to reduce their risk, which inherently reduce their owner's risk, they need to get change orders processed and closed fast. The longer a change order sit, the more opportunity there is for the project to go over budget, for there to be a dispute, whatever it is. And so, for GC also, if you have a $10,000 change order request, and let's say your markup is 4 or 5% on the overall project, you're really not making a ton of money. You might make $400 on the change order request. But if you don't process it in time, you could have a $10,000 dispute on your hand. So really, they just represent risk.
And so that clear communication is one way of reducing the risk as much as possible.
Correct. Yep.
So let's talk about it. You're working at DevCon. You've got yourself a construction management degree, and now you're the CEO of a software company and a founder. How did you make that transition from working with DevCon to being the CEO of Extracker? What led to that?
Yeah, I mean, frankly, it was just living this problem day in and day out. And, the original concept for the software started about 4.5 years ago. And a lot of it revolved around solving the challenge of field directed extra work. So getting rid of carbon copy, time material tags out on the job site. I had a project, it wasn't my last job, but the job before, where we had about 1,700 change orders on the project. And about half of them came from carbon copy T&M tags. And we fell incredibly far behind processing them because we were focused on delivering the building, the quality that our clients expect on time. That was our biggest focus. And we struggled to keep up with the financial side of things. And so, that was the initial vision behind the software. And so, but it grew from there to recognize that this isn't a problem just for subcontractors. It's an equally big problem for general contractors. And in general, change order communication is something that's done through email and COR logs that are done on PDF or Excel today. And so we just identified that there needed to be a middleman to keep both parties on the same page, because financial software isn't collaborative by nature. So all this was happening outside of the system. So that's where the idea started. And I made the early mistake of thinking I could manage a construction project or a software project just like a construction project. And managing engineers is quite a bit different. And so I, with my own money, hired a team of offshore engineers, and we built the initial V1 of the software. And like you said at the beginning, we launched in May of 2018, and we were off to the races. We started working with some of the biggest general contractors in the US. The first week we launched the software, I tapped into my Cal Poly construction management network, and also the network, I built up the last, decade working in the Bay Area. And so it's been really well received by the industry. The way the software works is, we sell directly to subcontractors, so they can use it as a tool to standardize the way they not only communicate, but also process time and material tags, change order requests. So what used to take 24 days, they can do in a matter of minutes through our automated workflows, and really add value to their general contractors so that they can be the one sub who is on top of change order requests, super organized, and sharing them in a cloud-based log where the GC can always access them. And the other way our software works is general contractors can make our software a project requirement where all subs on the job use it. They upload their change order requests to our software, so the GC has a full dashboard of all their risks. The GC can add review comments, dissect the change order requests. And then the subcontractors can also all use our mobile app for time and material tags, which again, once they're assigned digitally through our workflow, they're instantly logged in a T&M log, so both parties understand that risk. And then with the click of a button, the subs can turn those T&M tags into a change order request and share it with the GC. And then we also work for owners, so the GC can turn around and send their change orders through our software to their owner as well. So what's been cool is, we work with sub-tier vendors, subcontractors, general contractors, and owners. So really everyone in the food chain can get value out of our software.
I'm curious. I want to explore a couple of things with you, because you're sort of living and breathing this. It seems like there's always sort of a new technology that's being thrown at the construction industry, bells and whistles and all this kind of stuff. Now you're very focused in addressing a particular issue. I'd like to get your opinion on why construction companies fail with technology implementation in general. Do you have something you can give us on that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's a handful of reasons. I think for me, coming from the industry, for a subcontractor, for a general contractor, I even worked for a developer a little while during college. I've seen technology used, I've seen it not used, I've seen it fail. And I think the biggest reason why it fails is that it's not easy to implement. And so our software is out of the box. You can sign up and use it in 15 minutes. And we are focused on doing one thing extremely well, and that is facilitating change order communication. A lot of other tools in our industry try and do everything.
Yes.
And really they're a platform for that company rather than necessarily a platform for the industry. So what we're trying to do is connect companies in this workflow that happens on every project. And so I think we've seen really good success being really focused and really narrow. And I do think it's an interesting discussion on point solutions versus full products, kind of like what you were describing. The full product suite is hard to roll out because you're training your company to do everything in one software. Right. And frankly, every workflow may not be as best as it can be. And I do think that's interesting because our industry, we have specialty subcontractors on every single job site who do one thing extremely well, and we hire them specifically for that reason. And on top of that, they all use tools that do one thing extremely well. And so, you don't see a subcontractor whipping out like a multi-use tool to do 5 different things. They have the right tool for the job. And so, I do think there's a lot of great products in our space that do a lot of things, and they've done an incredible job. Procore just IPO. I mean, there's a lot of good products in our space, but I do think there is a need for specialization when it makes sense. Some point solutions don't solve a big enough problem, and it's really not worth it to train your company on one specific thing. But if it's a big enough problem that affects your bottom line, like change order communication, I believe that it deserves to be its own tool that is hyper specialized and the best it can be.
Yeah, it's very interesting just how you've identified, the one thing that every construction company to one degree or another struggles with. As you've brought the tool to market, what have you learned from your customers based on their feedback? What has been most valuable to you as you've developed a software tool? And the reason I'm asking that is because, when someone is bringing a tool to the market, they're obviously learning a ton. And I want to see how construction companies can help technology companies like yourself to improve their tools. So what have you learned from interacting with your clients?
Yeah, I mean, that's where we get most of our inspiration. Obviously, I had the original vision for the product, the problem we were solving. And, I think we built a pretty darn good solution out of the gates, but we had a long ways to go. And, frankly, we are inundated with great feedback from our customers, and it's our job to prioritize what is the best thing for us to focus on. And so, with a few of our enterprise clients, we have them on our customer advisory board. So we do monthly meetings with them, hear how it's going, get their feedback. But it's really our job also to filter that feedback to what's going to be best for the industry. Really, we're trying to build something that has to be one size fits all. We work with small, final clean companies that have 2 people, all the way up to, Performance Contracting Group, for example, that has 3,000 employees. And we have to build something that everyone can use to communicate change order requests, which isn't an easy task. And it's also our job to build the right features for the space. So our underlying principles are always, how can we make it faster? How can we make it simpler and easy to use? And how can we have people trust the product more? Those are kind of like the 3 things that we really focus on.
What do you mean by the trust part? Tell me about that. What do you mean by trust the product more?
Well, I mean, we're handling billions of dollars on our platform. And so they need to know that it's reliable, that it works. Recently offline mode has been a big feature request, so they can still track field directed extra work if they're in the middle of the desert or if they're in a 50-story skyscraper in New York. We had both of those requests, and trust that they're going to be able to document their work. So we have developed an offline mode where they can create a KNIM tag, get it signed on the job site. When they reconnect to the internet, they can send it to the client. But it's also our own internal processes. How can we be a reliable software partner for the industry? And we think that's really important.
What was the biggest mistake you made when you launched your company?
That's a great question. I can tell you exactly what it was. I would say it was a mistake. It was just a lack of totally understanding how big the opportunity was. When we first launched, we created a product for subcontractors so they could create these documents, send them to their general contractor.
Right.
And then we had a product for general contractor. But when we went to market, we started talking with, for example, large paving grading companies that hire 5 or 10 subcontractors on every project. But then they themselves also act as a subcontractor. And they were like, we want to use both tools. And so about 9 months into launch, we realized that we needed to make it even more one size fits all, so that anybody with the same account could receive change order requests and TNM tags, then they could turn around and send them. And so it was painful. We spent about 6 months basically re-architecting the whole platform after we launched. But we launched it, and it's been great. So we have tons of companies who send and receive things on our platform. Brand Safeway is a subcontractor we work with, big scaffolding subcontractor, and they primarily operate as a sub-tier vendor and work for other subcontractors. And they wouldn't have really been able to effectively use our software with the old version had we not made that giant change. So that was one of the early ones. But there's been, I've learned a lot through this process. Cal Poly's motto is learn by doing, which I think is a great one. And, I've definitely embraced this on that. I put my own money in to start the company, and I just said, I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to commit to it. I'm going to do it. And then when we built the product, before I quit, I told everyone I was quitting to start a software company. I told, the owner of DEFCON, and that really gave me the burning of the boats, as you get on the shore. I was all in and ready to go. And I think, had I not done that, it would have been easy to walk away from at certain points. But
how do you resist the temptation to not stick to your knitting, so to speak, to not stick to the focus on change orders? Aren't there other sort of shiny things out there that you're tempted to do? Or do you get your clients asking you, hey, what about this? What about that, Cameron? Can you do this for me?
Yeah, of course. It is challenging. I mean, I think a lot of it has to do with my own conviction. Having been from the industry, I know how big of a problem this is. I mean, in my opinion, we are solving the biggest problem in construction. And the way we're doing it as the first company to market. So it's a greenfield opportunity for us to go out there and really create this communication platform for the industry. And the more narrow we focus, the actual easier it is to get the product out there. As soon as we start going different directions, then we'll find ourselves competing with the more robust full service platforms out there. And we don't want to do that. We want to be partners to those software vendors out there, so that we can add value to the clients who've made big investments in those platforms. So that's the lane that we're going to stay in. And what's amazing is we were just at World of Concrete last week, and I met 4 companies out there that are in the Bay Area that I had never heard of.
Yeah, right.
And so
awesome.
It just tells you, how big the industry is, and they all have the same problems. We're happy with where we are, and we've got a long ways to go. I don't know if I mentioned it, but we did just announce earlier this week too that we raised a Series A with Jackson Square Ventures. So we are ramping up. We're investing more in the product, and obviously more in the rest of our company as well.
Obviously, a tool like yours, like Extracker, is excellent for that communication of change orders. If you're sitting across the table, let's say you're in a round table situation and you got a GC, you've got a sub, and you've got a developer or an owner. What are 3 things that they should be doing right from the get-go on a construction project to make the management of change orders as smooth as possible?
Other than using Extracker?
Absolutely.
Yeah, again, I mean, if you can actually have that meeting with all 3 of those stakeholders in the room, you're already in a good spot. Because a lot of times, it seems like that happens, but it might be a scheduling meeting, it might be a design review meeting. But if you can actually get the stakeholders in the room, no one in that room wants the project to wind up in a financial issue, or litigation, arbitration, wherever you want to go there. No one wants that outcome. And so if you can actually have that conversation early, set expectations, work together, and say, hey guys, we need to be on the same page. We need these things processed in the contract. Every contract says 2 weeks is usually the rule of thumb for processing a change order request. Let's do it in 5 days, and let's be on top of it, and let's help avoid that situation. If you've gotten to the point where you're having that conversation, you're in a good spot.
Yep. Excellent. Excellent. All right. So I do like to ask, Cameron, you're there in the Bay Area. Are you down in Silicon Valley? You're up in San Francisco? Where are you at?
I have actually done almost a full lap around the Bay Area. I started, when I graduated college, I didn't know anything about the Bay Area, and DevCon's office was in Milpitas.
Right.
So I first moved to Milpitas. It wasn't quite it's a family town, and it wasn't quite where I wanted to be. So I then moved to Los Gatos, and then later I met my wife and moved to San Francisco. And then we had our first kid about 1.5 years ago. My wife immediately got us out of San Francisco. And so now we were in Lafayette, and now we're in Danville. So we're slowly completing the circle. I think we finally found our final landing spot. But yeah, we're in the East Bay now in Danville. But yeah, it's been a good almost 12 years now in the Bay Area.
So if I'm in Danville, where's the best place to eat in Danville?
Oh, wow. Well, if it's lunch, it's definitely Domenico's. You got to get a sandwich.
Domenico's? And what do you like? What kind of sandwich at Domenico's?
I'll be honest. I usually have my wife order because she's from Danville and she went to Monte Vista, and they're all obsessed with Domenico's. But it's red pepper turkey, roasted. I can't remember the name of the. You're putting me on the spot here. I know. I know
you just got back from World of Concrete, so it might be a little hazy still, huh?
Exactly. My wife's going to kill me for not nailing the order, but just go to Domenico's, either ask for the special or get their turkey sandwich. You won't be disappointed.
All right. Domenico's in Danville. That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, I really, really appreciate your time here. As we're wrapping up here, where do you see Extracker in 5 to 10 years from now?
Yeah, I mean, the goal is to become the standard way the industry communicates change orders. That's where we want to be. And we're really looking to partner with all the companies in the industry. We think we can add value to all sides of the table. And we think we can get there because of the way we've architected the product. It's the companies invite each other to the software. So our best salespeople are the companies using it. They love our software and they help us. Subs help introduce us to GCs, and GCs introduce us to subs and their owners. And it's been great. So that's really where we see ourselves in 5 to 10 years. And at that point, we may expand into other things, but this is our focus right now.
That's excellent. And if people want to get in touch with you, how can they get in touch with you, Cameron?
Yeah, just shoot me an email, cpage@extracker.com.
That's right. And that's extracker.com. We'll put links in the show notes to the website that you can check you out. There's customer stories and a little bit more information about the product. I had you on because change orders, I know, are a big pain in the neck for all of my clients to one degree or another. So it's great that there's a solution out there for the communication of those change orders. Cameron, I appreciate you joining me here today.
Yeah, and I appreciate you doing the podcast and helping the industry out. It's awesome.
Yeah,
thanks for having me on.
All right, right on. Today's episode was brought to you by the Construction Conclave. If you as a construction leader would like to develop your skills and get involved in a community of like-minded construction professionals who are focused on building healthy teams, profitable projects, and long-term successful businesses, then the Construction Conclave is for you. It's a private invitation-only group of construction leaders that are focused on developing their leadership skills. We do training every single month online that looks at how to become a better leader in a very practical, straightforward way. We also have other events that build community and camaraderie so that you can associate with others who are interested in developing their skills as leaders. If you'd like more information and to see if you qualify for participating in the conclave, feel free to reach out to me, eric@ericanderton.com. Thank you for listening to this episode of Construction Genius. Hope you found that 1% of inspiration to help you in the next few days. If you like the show, please give us a 5-star review on iTunes, share it with other construction leaders who you think would benefit, and thanks again for listening.